Hello and welcome. We're previewing the Bankers Top 1000 for 2018. I'm with Silvia Pavoni, the economics editor, and we're discussing Latin America and North America. Silvia, let's start with North America, where obviously you've got a number of major global banks. How did the American banks do this year?
So 10 years since the eruption of the financial crisis, the world's largest banks are definitely back on their feet, especially US banks. So we have JPMorgan, Bank of America and Wells Fargo firmly at the top of our North American ranking with the largest Tier 1 capital in the region. And they also top the table of most profitable banks when we look at fee and commission income in the world. So the same three banks right there at the top.
Okay,
so
and that's probably the big investment banks that are
those are the big investment banks, and we look forward to what's going to happen in the coming months next year as the heavy body of Dodd-Frank rules are beginning to soften, and we've seen the first rollbacks taking place earlier this year. So this paves road really well for those banks.
So good news for North American banks. What about when we move south into Latin America? How are things looking there? I mean, it's been a tough time in the region.
It has been a very tough time economically, a lot of political uncertainty as well. But the region remains the second most profitable in the world after Africa. So let me give you some figures in terms of return on assets. The whole region has a 1.93% return on equity, 20.94% return on capital, which we measure as Tier 1 capital, 25.76%. So all in all, it's still quite a profitable part of the world.
So banks there, they managed to sort of dismiss the economic problems and the political problems.
So it depends on where you look. So you have pockets of very high profitability, which perhaps are not particularly typical of the whole of the region, such as Argentina.
Okay, so tell us about Argentina, because Argentina had a complete meltdown this year, didn't it? So how have the Argentine banks managed themselves through that?
If we just look at the banking sector, and of course our figures stop at the end of the financial year of 2017. So if we look at the banking sector, traditionally because of the very high inflation, these banks have had quite good luck. And because of the government's also softening of certain rules that affected the banking sector, they are becoming also to become more active in certain areas, such as, for example, mortgage lending. So you're seeing these banks now being able to lend longer term, something that wasn't really
Okay, so what you're saying is we might see some of the
before.
impact of the crisis showing up next year. All right, but now if we go north to Brazil,
yes.
Again, traditionally you've had some very strong banks there. You have had economic problems in Brazil, but how are the banks faring there?
The largest banks, Itaú Unibanco, the top, by far the largest in the whole of the region, not just in the country,
yes.
have called early the very awful economic crisis that Brazil went through, and from which it has just emerged very recently. And they're still in very good shape. So Tier 1 capitals have all expanded, and in some ways also assets and profitability is still rather strong. So those banks are doing fine. And of course now the biggest question mark hangs over the political situation. We're having presidential elections in October, and it's considered one of the most challenging to call. So it's it would be quite difficult to call with a number of sort of maverick candidates, and there is one big reform, which is the pensions reform, that still has to be approved.
Okay,
which
so let's finish off with two of the smaller countries. Tell us a bit about Venezuela, because we haven't included the Venezuelan banks.
Right.
So why haven't we done that? And then tell us a bit about Peru, which I think is doing quite well.
Okay, so we decided to leave the Venezuelan banks out because of the near impossibility of analyzing the financial data. So we have inflation rates in 5 digits by the end of the year. Some are saying that it might even reach 13,000%, which is impossible, and we decided to leave them out.
And partly because of the exchange rate.
There is also an exchange rate issue, a number of various exchange rates that, again, make the analysis quite skewed, of course.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
So we left them out. And hoping to, willing them really well, and hoping to, wishing them well, and hoping to be able to re-include them in our ranking soon. Peru, so it's an interesting market, very low levels of bancarization, but the country is doing all it can to make sure that wider parts of the population are included in the banking sector and in being served by the financial institutions. And there is a very big push in terms of digitalization, trying to, again, reach the until now unbanked people.
Okay, great news. Thank you very much, Silvia.
Thank you.